Well, good day. Good day. Another wonderful day with the Crotchety Old Men podcast. Looks like I'm frozen, but you can hear me. Yeah, it's another fun day with the Crotchety Old Men podcast. And I said at the last episode, I was going to stop introducing myself. So, for those of you who know, we're the Crotchety Old Men. And I'm Gary, there's George, and there's PC. And the other gentleman, I'm going to let George go ahead and kick us off and do the intro. And we got to strap ourselves in and get ready for another exciting episode. George?
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing?
We're great, man. Doing great.
Good.
Getting better.
Good. Hey, we sometimes have guests return, and we felt that Mr. Greg Henley told a great story when we were here last time. So we thought it'd be good to have him back on again and talk a little bit about what he's been doing. Just kind of give you a little background. Greg's been around, heavily involved in businesses, establishing financial and business strategies. He's also led 2 bank acquisitions. But what we talked about the last time was a production that he produced as far as director, which was Slavery to Legacy, the Alonzo Herndon story, which was a story of the first Black millionaire in Atlanta, Georgia. So we're going to focus some on that today. We're going to welcome Greg back on, and the conversation may go in a couple of different directions, but that's how we are. How are we going to do it this morning on the Crotchety Old Man? Greg, welcome again. How you doing?
I'm doing very fine. It's really good to be here. It's been a minute, and I feel like I'm part of the club here in terms of the Crotchety Old. So I'm in the right place. But thanks for inviting me back, and I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Good.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? I like to get things started. So, Greg, of course, George gave, the background, some of it. You have an extensive background from production and, certainly as a mentor and actually as a deal maker. That's one of the most impressive things I like to see, man, as brothers and sisters out here making deals. But let me back up a bit before we jump right into that and tell us, how did you get started? You made this film about Mr. Alonzo Herndon, and certainly we want our audience to hear a lot more about that. This being Black History Month, this is our last Monday of the month, and so we'd be remiss if we did not explore that. So, Greg, tell us about it.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to some of my teaching experience. I've had the opportunity to teach entrepreneurship. And in teaching entrepreneurship, one of the things that I teach is how do you scale a business?
Yes.
My interest is not only in teaching, but it is in actually operating businesses. So one of the questions I ask myself is, how do you scale teaching? Mm. And interestingly enough, what I came up with was TV. Okay. So because it's a way to reach a lot of people, and if you are able to entertain while you produce shows, you're able to reach a lot of people and teach them some of the principles that come to starting businesses, but starting careers, and just in terms of elevating themselves as individuals. So my interest in TV and film started when I was thinking about how do we start businesses in scaling teaching. And what I started doing was I went on a road trip where I interviewed a bunch of entrepreneurs, and I created a film I also wrote a book based on that road trip, and I created a film that was broadcast on Georgia Public Broadcasting, where I highlighted 3 Atlanta-based entrepreneurs, one of whom is the gentleman who invented the Super Soaker water gun. And for the audience who doesn't know, his name is Dr. Lonnie Johnson. He's a Black man who's got over 100 patents, and he lives and works here in Atlanta. So a little bit more about Black history, but with an existing individual. In doing that film, where I featured Dr. Lonnie Johnson, there were 2 other entrepreneurs also in that film. And in talking to the Georgia Public Broadcasting folks, to go back a little bit, before we start talking to the GPB folks, I was able to interview Ambassador Andrew Young, so another icon of civil rights and Black history. And I was able to get him to talk about Alonzo Herndon as a way to introduce the film and go back to some of the pioneering entrepreneurs here in Atlanta. So part of that initial film, I talked about Alonzo Herndon as a way to provide some context for the pioneering Black entrepreneurs here in Atlanta. In talking to the GPB folks who, as I said, they broadcast the film, we had a conversation where we were saying, nobody's done a film about Alonzo Herndon. Again, he's the first Black millionaire here in Atlanta. And I think we were all surprised. But in that conversation, I said, okay, I'll do it. It's one of those, if not me, then who questions that we all have to ask ourselves. I think we all come to that at some point in our lives. If not me, then who's going to do it? Right. So I volunteered to do the film. One of the key things for me is he is part of my DNA, right? He's a pioneer upon whose shoulders I think all of us stand, but certainly I stand. So again, he's one of the first guys who was born a slave and created a business legacy. So I was happy to do the film, but from a business standpoint, from a TV standpoint, I was able to get Georgia Public Broadcasting to say we will broadcast it, which was important to me in terms of my business, right? I wanted distribution before I produced the film. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time and money producing the film if I didn't have a place for the film. Interestingly enough, GPB did not broadcast the film, but the other PBS station here in Atlanta ended up broadcasting the film. Again, that's part of the journey of an entrepreneur, right? You think you're going in one direction, but you have to pivot sometimes and go in a different direction. So I was able to pivot and get the film broadcast on WABE, which is Atlanta's public broadcasting station. So that's how the film got started, was a conversation with Georgia Public Broadcasting, and I gave you a little bit of background there.
Amen. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. Thank you for that background. Thank you. I kind of reminisce with regards to doing public broadcasting. I remember when I stayed in Los Angeles back in the early 90s with public broadcasting, I developed a show called Ideas in Action. And it was had a similar format, Greg, to yours, about entrepreneurs and meeting entrepreneurs in the South LA area. Mm-hmm. I was astounded to meet some men and women who created everything from shotgun stocks, the stocks of a shotgun right there in South Central LA, to women who had daycare centers for physically challenged children. And so having that entrepreneurial passion and seeing us, and certainly given the history of it, presents, I would say it's like paving a runway for those who come behind us so they can see they can see it, and I'm so glad to hear that. And I knew I wasn't the only one, obviously, but it's refreshing to hear your story. And that's why we're here this morning, that we want to hear more about Greg Henley and that journey and how that paved the way. And you may have to go back to some of the other areas in your life, but hey, the time and everything is open to you, my brother. So pour it on out. Don't hold.
What you're talking about is exactly the point of, what I'm attempting to do is to. Amen. It's not so much to illustrate me and what I've done, but it's what other people have done in order to uplift the entire community.
That's right.
A little bit about my background and the reason for this is I grew up in New York, as I was saying before we started. And I was the first one in my family to go to college, which means that my dad brought me up well, but there were things that he wasn't able to do that I was able to see. but I wasn't really able to understand. One example being investment banking. I didn't really understand what it was until I went to graduate school. And therefore, it really wasn't an opportunity that was available to me to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of opportunities that we, as quite frankly, as Black men and women, we have the skills for, we have the innate ability to do, but we just aren't able to see, and therefore it's not part of our thought process. And what you were just describing and what I'm attempting to do is to make some of those opportunities available to us because we can see them.
Amen. Yes, sir.
That makes sense. And, when speaking about Alonzo Herndon, a slave who became a business icon, it's a way to show that it is possible for us to succeed in that way. So those are some of the underlying motivations that I don't often get a chance to talk about. So thank you.
Yes.
Greg, what's interesting to me, and I share some of the same vision and experience you did, because I was doing documentaries with PBS back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And it was nationally syndicated out of Detroit. And I got my experience from this brother who they had recently laid to rest, who his name was David Rambo. And he taught us, there was a class, and I was one of the students. We had a student committee that brought Black studies to the university at Wayne State University. We demanded that we had Black professors, and he was one of them. Mm-hmm. So he had this class called Television and Radio in the Black Community, something nobody's ever really heard of before. What it did was it taught us how to produce television, and it taught us how to produce radio in a step-by-step fashion. Now, he got a grant for that, and that grant powered his ability to parlay with Channel 50, which is a local broadcast, and so forth and so on. But what you said was so important to me, because we artists have this discussion about, is art an imitation of life, or is life an imitation of art? Mm-hmm. And when you look at that subject or that question, though that's the question that really gets vision started, where people can see things that they don't normally see. You've got right now, you've got history books that are taken out of the classrooms. You've got people dismantling museums that we've created to tell our own story. And I just think, where you're sitting right now is very important in terms of the kind of stories we tell ourselves, so that the people behind us can have a vision that there's certain things that are out here that are possible.
Yeah. One of the things that I haven't talked about yet, and how I met George, was the other thing that I've done in terms of distribution is we've had a number of private screenings. And those private screenings are a way to get the information out to people who don't actually watch the PBS show. So for me, that's really exciting, because it also gives me the opportunity as a panelist to engage with the audience, answer questions, and see what is important to the audience. So PC, that's another way I think to get the word out, is through some of the private screenings. And, for me, the private screenings have really exceeded my expectations. I've got another one on Wednesday of this week. I did one last week, but really it was last year that I emphasized the private screenings. And, what made me proud is it gave me the opportunity to contribute to Black History Month.
Right.
We did, overall, we've probably done 15 private screenings. And the one that we're doing Wednesday, somebody called me, that kind of thing, who had seen it. So it certainly makes me feel pretty good about that. But the point that you're making in terms of let's get the word out, that's another way to do it, is not only on the PBS, but it's through the private screenings.
So let me ask you this question, Greg. We've recently heard things where they were taking things out of the museum that related to Black history, They're cutting certain books out of the education system. And you've already touched a little bit about the importance of having those kinds of things available for Black folks to see. Why don't you comment a little further on that issue?
Yeah, that gets me kind of emotional, what they're doing. And kind of going back, Greg's plan was to have this movie that I did broadcast about 3 years ago. But, as I was saying, I was expecting it to be broadcast on Georgia Public Broadcasting. That kind of didn't happen. So it kept getting delayed, which was frustrating to me.
Mm-hmm.
But the film was broadcast and the private screenings were done last year, which is when a lot of the initiatives that you're talking about occurred. Right? It was at the beginning, when it happened.
Right,
but it was,
right.
it was
Exactly.
last year. And the point that I'm trying to make is the timing, God's timing, not Greg's timing, was that the movie for the Black History movie and so forth was done at the same time that some of our initiatives, some of our 100-year-old initiatives were being taken away. So God had a plan that was a lot different than what I had planned. And that's the way I'm looking at this, is the timing was of when the movie came out and people saw the movie was exactly when some of these initiatives were being taken away, which to me is not a coincidence.
Right.
Greg, it breaks my heart. I'm sorry.
Right.
No, I was going to say, in terms of the Alonzo Herndons and everybody on this panel, we know everybody from Madam C.J. Walker to other entrepreneurs, Booker T. Washington. One of my premises that DEI and all these other things are being dismantled or what have you, but I still have to go back to our ancestors, our roots of where entrepreneurism still not only survived, but it thrived. And I was in a conversation not very long ago, and I said, is anybody in modern day, and it probably is one person saw someone get hung. Back in those days, these men and women, they made a decision to not be in slavery. They may be enslaved physically, but they made a decision not to be enslaved mentally.
Yep.
And so they started the Tulsas of this world of America. They started the Black Bottoms here in Detroit. They started the business districts in LA, Atlanta, Philly, you name it, New York, and they thrived from Harlem to Huntsville, Alabama. There was no affirmative action. There was no civil rights. Well, there probably was a civil rights movement, but these people took action. And they paved the way, but somewhere along the way, we got hoodwinked and bamboozled into this myth about working for someone else forever. Now, I'm not against jobs. Obviously, we all need those things. But Jim Rome, who's deceased now, wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Wealth and Happiness. And he made this quote, and I've never forgot it. Wages will make you a living, but profits will make you rich. And then in 1984, 86, circa somewhere around there was another phenomenal brother named Reginald Lewis.
Yep.
And he wrote that book, Why Should White Boys Have All the Fun? He didn't say boys, but I will. Why should white guys have all the fun?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the fuel, Greg, that put me on this passion of talking to others, particularly now that I'm still young, but we got this other group coming behind us. And it's so refreshing, man, to see the Magic Johnsons and the Michael Jordans and the Oprah Winfrey. And yeah, they're in entertainment and sports, but you got a whole heck of a lot of more people out here that have small, profitable businesses that are feeding their families, leaving legacies and things. And so when I read your bio about your passion, and we just kind of talked a little bit about it before we came on the air here about mergers and acquisitions, we're about to face the biggest wealth transfer known to mankind. And before I take my last breath upon this planet, I want to make certain that folks that look like us see it, because if you can't see something, it's hard to believe something for most of us.
Yeah, you said it better than I did. Yep.
Greg, take it away, man, because you know where I'm going with this.
You're kind of preaching to the choir here. You could probably figure
Already know.
it out. But what I wanted to kind of take what you said a little bit further is to give you a sense of what some of my goals are, because Alonzo Herndon is the first black millionaire in Atlanta, but there's a first black millionaire in Memphis, right, in Birmingham.
Yes.
You talked about Tulsa. Raleigh Durham is another Black Wall Street.
Yep.
And you know what I've developed, I haven't produced this yet because I need some help, quite frankly. But I've developed a series that tells the stories of these other pioneering Black entrepreneurs. You talked about Madam C.J. Walker. Well, you guys may know, but a lot of people don't know. Annie Malone came before Madam C.J. Walker, and was, if you believe Annie Malone, she was the mentor to Madam C.J. Walker.
Right.
So there's some lesser known pioneers whose stories also need to be told. I'd like to tell those stories.
Yes.
I think it's beyond PBS, though. I think it's more network or streamer. But I've for the most part developed the series, but I do need to get some backing to be able to tell us the stories that you're talking about, that I'm talking about. But that's I think that's one direction that can be taken.
And Greg, I was when I was with PBS, we did a lot of underwriting, because PBS is not, obviously is not a commercial station. So you got the National Endowment of the Arts, you got the Kellogg folk involved, especially when it related to subject matter that they were very much interested in and had their monies in. And I think you raised a very interesting point just now about the way we look at television and the way we disseminate information. And I think at some point we've got to look at a different way that we need to do that, especially when they play the kind of political games and tricks that they apply to us when we do produce television. And they do it so that we can fail at the matter. I've had to sit in the studio and do my own editing because I could not trust that white boy to do that editing, because when I saw it, it wasn't what I thought it was going to turn out to be.
Yep.
And I'm sure you dealt with that same kind of issue. So I think it would be an interesting discussion to traverse what are some of the vehicles that we could use that are different from TV and still reach the masses of people that we need to reach, because I think your series is extremely important. I think it ties the United States together. I think it talks about what goes on with different people in different regions of the United States, which is very important when you look at production, when you look at what people are doing in their areas at a specific time. And that's quite a story to tell. That's a great series. I like that idea.
Yeah, I think there are vehicles. I think there's the YouTubes. I think there's some vehicles being developed even now. The challenge still comes down to funding.
Right.
In order to do a quality job and in order to distribute it.
Right.
The Herndon film, as an example, was self-funded, and that's just not sustainable, quite frankly. I was not able to get.
I was amazed when you said that in the last interview that we had. I just couldn't imagine.
Yeah. And I had to do a lot of the things that you were talking about myself. I hired a few people to do certain things, but I'd like to hire people who are better than me to do some of the things that, need to be done. That was the goal in terms of starting the business, was to hire people better than me and actually do have even better production value than I was able to do. So, that's the challenge to me is access to the right people, its distribution, and its funding. So those are the challenges in putting together, I think, quality projects, which is why I was saying earlier that I'm exploring going to networks and streamers, because they certainly have the funding and they have the distribution and they have the access to the people, or have to come from the filmmaker. But those are the things that need to be overcome, again, in order to do a quality job. The other thing that I'm looking into is how can I utilize artificial intelligence? And I think we're close, but then there's ethical. I think I can overcome some of the ethical and moral challenges, but that may be another vehicle to be able to produce quality work.
I don't know if any of you have seen it yet, but there is probably been out for a while, the documentary on Tyler Perry, Maxine's Baby.
Mm-hmm.
And he speaks and he shows about the struggle of not only of production and film producing, but the struggle period of business, the struggle of starting a business, owning your own business, and a lot of the ills that affect us most. It's been said that when America catches a cold, Black folks catch pneumonia.
Yep.
And there's a lot, fear, anxiety, and uncertainty happening in this country. And while we may not be able to right all the wrongs that have been done to us over the years, in the words of the late, great Reverend Jesse Jackson, we still must keep hope alive.
Yep.
And in doing that, we must never lose sight or lose the grip of ownership, owning our own business, our own land, our own production, our own everything. And there's a lot of hurdles and obstacles that's in our way. But as we started earlier, none of our ancestors allowed those things to stop them. And to this day, we still have an opportunity. Right now, the highest number of unemployment impacts the Black community. All right. And so if we don't create businesses and jobs for them, then it's on us why our folks don't have proper employment and things of that nature. And so to head in that direction, because time is moving real fast, as we all know that. And we have, sure, we got to get that word out. But like you said, Greg, earlier, one of the biggest obstacles is funding. And one of the things that I've taken away from that Tyler Perry movie is this. And he's made a true statement. How the heck is Big Mama always able to raise enough money to get Junebug out of jail? Okay. It was called the 3 F's: friends, families, and fools. All right. Now, don't be pejorative about the latter group, because they just believed in it. They believed in the Gary Smith and the George Crumleys and the Paul Clemens and the Greg Henley. They didn't know whether you're going to win or lose. But you got those other two called friends and family. And those resources have never gone away. There are still people out here that believe in you, Greg. And there's still people out here to see the vision and the passion that you have and the story that's in you that has to come out one way or the other. And you have stories like we all probably do. All right. And so I'm saying all this to say that the first step is the biggest step. Martin Luther King said it again so eloquently. You can't see the top of the staircase, but you got to take the first step to get there. So I said all that, man, to say that, yeah, I'm with you 100% every which way I can. And certainly we will have some conversation after our podcast here. But to our audience today, as we give them hope, inspiration, and things of that nature, that because there's people out there, there's people out there, man, they're being held hostage in their own minds.
Right.
I get that all the time, man. But brothers, young guys and stuff, sisters and stuff, they got it inside of them. They just don't know how to get it out. No, I'm talking about skills and all that kind of stuff. So, Greg, can you share anything with us along that line?
Well, no, I agree 100% with you, and hopefully some of the work that you guys are doing, some of the work that I'm doing, can inspire people to, to fulfill the potential that they really have. Because like you, I believe that, particularly Black men and women, we have the potential. And sometimes, as you said, the biggest challenge is up here.
Yeah.
So let's, I really want you guys to continue to do what you're doing, and hopefully we can, collectively with the four of us, figure out a way to do some things where we can help others, because I think that really is the point.
Amen.
Amen.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. George?
Yeah, one of my favorite things to say is faith, not fear.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how I, navigate through things on a daily basis, because there's a lot of things we don't know, but there's a lot of resources that are available out there to us. And that was one of the things that my curiosity when I first saw the film that's showing last year was, I got to meet this guy, because of the fact that, he cracked the code on something that just sparked my interest. And I said, we've got to have this for the podcast, because here again, our four pillars are information, education, exposure, and opportunity. And, with one person's opportunity becomes others. So, you've kind of hit on some of the questions I had, which was, here again about funding and things like that. But you kind of touched on one thing I want you to kind of expand on, just kind of get your thoughts on AI. That's one of the big buzzwords in everything right now. And I was talking to some folks the other day, and, there was some fear and, what it's going to do, what it's not going to do. And we've been trying to put, more clarity to that, because we want to see it as it's a tool. And if we don't get on this bandwagon and understand how this tool can help us, we're going to be left behind. So can you kind of talk a little bit about how you see AI in the film industry helping you, growing you, and things like that?
Yeah, for me, one of the things that I'd like to do is to be able to tell stories. And a lot of my interest is historical. I think one way to make stories interesting is to do reenactments. So you have a specific individual, specific character, actually acting out a scene of overcoming some obstacle. And I think rather than just telling the audience that it happened, if we can show the audience.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, some productions have used actual actors to do it. So obviously it's not the real historical people, but it is actors. And I think that AI can be used, again, ethically and morally. I mean, that's important to me.
Yeah.
As a way to do reenactments, which would make the story more interesting, and therefore more people will see the story. So that's the way I'm thinking about it. We're not quite there just yet, but I think we're really close in terms of the film. Sorry, the docuseries, which is what I'm interested in, and being able to tell reenactments. So that's the way I have already dabbled in using artificial intelligence. George, I think your point is extremely well taken with me, where it is a tool, and if we're not conversant, if we're not utilizing it properly, we're going to be left behind. I think the fear is justified, but I think the question is, what's the action that needs to be taken to overcome the fear? And I think that is to immerse yourself in becoming proficient in using it.
Well, from a fear perspective, I think it's based on where the information is coming from. It's and you have to always consider the source, because it was built, and there are people utilizing it, and it's enhancing what they're doing. The fear factor is more so to hold people back, because normally with fear we don't want to do it. We don't want to touch the hot stove. We don't want to get in it. We want somebody else to be the guinea pig. But we have to get out there and be that first person, because this is a plain level opportunity right now. These opportunities don't come along a lot. And whether it's going to flourish like the internet, we don't really know. But what we do know, there's a purpose, there's a tool, and we need to educate ourselves in whatever form or fashion that we're doing today, to enhance what we're doing so that we can keep pace with everybody else. Because, as you guys have said before, we're the last to the party. We can't always be the last of the party. And there's so many opportunities and there's so many roadblocks that are being thrown up. But we, as individuals that are risk takers, we have to get out there and do that. So here again in the film industry, we talked a little bit about AI. So touch a little bit, because you've got extensive background in financing, and you helped with the acquisition of a couple banks. If people are listening to this, can you give them some resources and some avenues to look at to find funding for these types of projects?
Well, let me kind of go back, because we're looking at the same thing, but a little bit differently, which I think is actually pretty good. For me, when I think about fear, it's something I think we should all face, not shrink from. And I think that's really important for all of us is let's understand the source of the fear. Let's learn from it, and then let's face it and determine what's the best way to overcome it. You're absolutely right, George. A lot of us don't do that. A lot of people don't do that. But I think it's very important for us to face the fear and learn what's the best way to overcome it for us as individuals. For me as an old guy, I really like this podcast. AI was something that, there was a fear factor of sorts, but the way to approach it is to, again, try to learn, and then how can I use it to my best advantage? One of my colleagues, when I told my colleague that I was going to use AI in some of my productions, she said, "Well, that means you're not going to, you're not going to use one of my friends as actors." And, my reaction was, no, that's not the case. It's going to allow me to do something that I wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Right. Once I started looking into it. So I'm sorry, I know I didn't answer your question, but I wanted to just kind of give you my perspective on how one should, and I know we don't always do it, but how one should approach fear. So I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I think you said it, Greg, when you say you got to face your fears. I mean, it's like anything else, any other obstacle, what have you, that crops up in life. You have to face it. Okay. In order to overcome anything, you got to look at it head on and attack it. All right. I think David, the little story in the Bible about David and Goliath. He didn't try to run around the guy, didn't try to go up on him. He came right at him. Okay. Sure. So you face that fear and you just turn that attack. It's like Krav Maga. You use that same energy and that same force against your attacker. All right. And people that don't know about Krav Maga, go to YouTube and you'll learn a few moves. But my point here is that facing fear, we've been doing it all our lives. It's in our DNA.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
There's some folks now already afraid because they think that ICE is coming to get them next. All right. And all this nonsense. All right. No. Bring it. Is my attitude. Come on, let's go. Okay. And that goes for anything. So we have to have that tenacity. It's in our DNA. All right. But we've never let fear stop us before. So why is now all of a sudden with this AI, this tool, as George named, and that's all it is. It's tool. AI has been around for a long time. It's like serendipity. You buy a daggone yellow car and you haven't seen any yellow cars until you roll off the lot in yours. Now all of a sudden, damn, there's yellow cars everywhere. Well, that's the way AI is today. Okay. It didn't just happen in 2025, 24. AI was around in the 1990s and probably before then. We just did not know about it. Okay. It's been in our cell phones for ages. It's known as a chip. So get over that nonsense. Let's find out what are the various uses of AI. You have generative AI, you have predictable AI, you have data centers. Why the heck you think they're building all these data centers and soon in your own backyard?
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. So what we have to do is be aware, be open, and change, because change is always going to happen. And I think the thing that we're more afraid of than anything else, it's not AI, it is change. And
Always going to happen. And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I think you're absolutely right. Change is the only constant.
Yeah.
There will always be change, and we need to determine how we're going to react to it. And I think the main thing is we need to understand it and react head on to it.
Yeah, exactly. And respond to it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Because I've learned over the years that when we react to things, like you take some medicine, if you have a reaction, that's typically a negative. Okay. But if you take some medicine for a cough or a cold or whatever, and you respond to that medication, now that's more of a positive. So now, instead of being reactory toward things that happen to us, we need to respond. And sometimes no response is the best response. But wisdom, knowledge, and understanding will teach us that. But what we do have to do is embrace change, use change to our advantage, because change is good. Not all change, but some change is good. And there's a silver lining in down near every cloud. Most of the prosperity, most of the great things that has happened in this country, in this world, and on this planet happened during wars, famines, droughts, negative things, depressions and stuff. That's when things really happen. Okay. Everybody can do good in the good times. But you hear stock investors tell you that, hey, when the stock goes down, what? Buy more.
Yep.
Well, you got to use a little caution with that, but still, that is the thing. Buy the dip. The people that we're talking about, all right, they created wealth through real estate, through what have you, during bad times, horrible times. So what we have to do, and these changes, like you say, it's a constant. And Greg, I want to commend you again, as we're getting short on our time here, but I certainly want you to have the last word. But as these AIs and all these other things come, there's always going to be something coming up. There's going to be another pandemic. All right. So what we have to do is not get ready, but be ready, so that we can take advantage of the opportunities that's headed our way.
Well, really, what I'd like to do is I'd like to commend the three of you for doing this, for your platform, for telling folks about investing, about finance, about all the things that you do, which I think are so important. A lot of that's a big part of my background outside of the film side. And, the thing that I'd like to end with is just to commend you guys, to support you guys, and, to tell you guys to keep on keeping on doing what you guys are doing. I think it's really important. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important that, our audience, can follow you as well. I mean, that's one of the purposes of having the show, is to make sure that you can also prosper, for this opportunity. So if they want to get in touch with you, if they want to see the film where your next film showing is, can you kind of give us that information?
Contact me via email is the best way to do it. And that's ghenley, CHENLEY at BNext, BENEXXT. So two X's.com. So ghenley at BNext.com.
Super.
Easiest way to do it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Hey, as always, really appreciate you coming on, and you have an open invitation. You come back anytime you want. We love the discussion, and hey, that's what the crotchety old men do, right? So which one of you guys got the words for today? PC, you raising your finger.
Let me, before PC goes, let me, crotchety old man. I think I'm part of your club.
Absolutely, Greg.
I'm not a charter member, but
you fit right in.
I sure do.
You're honorary member, my brother.
Yes, sir. Today's word of encouragement comes from Kahlil Gibran, one of my favorite, and it goes like this: the teacher who is indeed wise does not bid you to enter the house of his wisdom, but rather lead you to the threshold of your own mind.
Here.
Great. And as we always say on the Crotchety Old Man podcast, if you didn't know, now
you know.
All right. Take care. Be blessed.
Thank you, man.
Peace out, y'all.